Alright everyone, you know what time it is. It's time for another Strange and Dark Cases compilation. This is where I take all of the smaller cases I come across while researching that aren't really long enough to be their own video and put them all together for one big video at the beginning of every month. With all that out of the way, let's get started. Here we've got Man Burns Woman to Death on New York Subway. The news in the US really flew into a frenzy lately over a case in New York that really shows an unparalleled lack of respect for human life. Not only that, but it reignited rage with ongoing issues involving migrants in New York City specifically. This story started with a 33-year-old illegal immigrant from Guatemala named Sebastian Zepeda. While Sebastian had no criminal record in New York, he was known to have been kicked out of the country in 2018 before making his way back in illegally. While he hadn't been charged for any crimes, he was known to be a very heavy drug user who lived in and out of homeless shelters. One day at around 7:30 a.m., Sebastian made his way out to the Coney Island Stillwell Avenue station and headed over to the F train. Once the train pulled up, a woman hopped on the train as it would continue to idle for a few more minutes. Sebastian simply walked up to the woman, who was now seated at the end of the car, pulled out a lighter, and lit her clothes on fire. Within only a few seconds, the woman was completely engulfed in flames, standing up and frantically trying to put them out as nobody around her did anything to help. Sebastian actually fanned the flames himself with a piece of clothing, seemingly trying to make it worse. Cops nearby saw the smoke and ran over to the car, seeing the burning woman still inside. A cop pulled out a radio and called for backup while Sebastian simply walked over and sat on a nearby bench, watching the whole thing. A crowd gathered around and watched as the police shouted to them, asking if anyone had seen anything. One of the cops actually walked right over to Sebastian. He pulled his hood up as the officer talked to him. Luckily for him though, the officer was just telling him to leave the area, saying, "Do me a favor, walk down there, I need this space cleared up." So, Sebastian simply left and walked away. A little while later, a group of high schoolers called the police to say that they had seen Sebastian on the F line when the chaos had erupted. The police were able to track him down pretty quickly, still wearing the exact same clothes as before on a different train only a short distance away. The cops then had that train stop at Herald Square. There they went through each car until they finally found him. He still had his lighter in his pocket. At 1 p.m. that day, the police were carrying a body bag out of the train and placing it on a gurney. They then wheeled it out of the station and out into a medical examiner's van. The woman still hadn't been identified to the media. The body was in such bad shape that it was unrecognizable, with the staff in the van turning out the lights in the car so that even the medical staff wouldn't have to see its condition. Sebastian is now facing charges of first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and arson after what had happened. Immigration officials confirmed that he was in the country illegally at the time of the crime. One of his roommates during a recent stint at a homeless shelter spoke out about him, saying, "He smoked K2, drank, and bugged out. He would bug out and talk to himself when he was high, but he never harmed anybody or himself. When he wasn't high, he'd talk like we're talking regular." He said that on the morning of the attack, Sebastian said, "I'm going out to make my normal run," with him never hearing from him again until seeing him on the news. Sebastian himself said that he was blackout drunk at the time of the attack and doesn't remember a thing. Now we have Mom Who Cooked Toddlers Jailed for Life. Full disclosure, while this is actually a case that took place back in 2017, it has recently finally come to a conclusion. Back in 2017, a mother named Lamora Williams called 911 to tell the police that she had left her two sons with a babysitter, come back home, and found them both lifeless. She was notably far more concerned with getting in trouble than the fact that her kids were dead, something that tipped the police off as to what had really happened fairly immediately. She said on the phone, "When I came in, the stove was lying on my son, on my youngest son's head, and my other son was laid out on the floor with his brains laid out on the floor. I don't know what to do. I just came home from work. Can you please help me? Can you please tell me? I don't want to get locked up because this is not my fault. I had just come home from work." Things were made even worse when she decided to call the father of the kids. She called him to tell him that the kids were dead, but this time she'd even turned on the video call function and showed him the bodies, disturbing him in the process. He also called the police to tell them what he had just seen. When the police came out to the home, they found that it was pretty evident that the kids were placed onto the ground and had an overturned oven on top of their heads. The heat was then cranked up to the point where their heads were basically unrecognizable, with the autopsy report saying it would require an extensive amount of time to get to this degree. The police only found evidence pointing towards Lamora as being the killer. Describing the whole thing as something out of a horror movie, they arrested her, saying that she knowingly and intentionally killed the children in that bizarre manner and tried to pin it on the babysitter. Lamora denied it all, saying that she was innocent. Lamora's mom tried to get some sympathy for her, saying that she was in danger of ending her life in jail after her arrest. Her sister wasn't so keen to defend her though, saying that she shouldn't have had the kids in the first place. She said that this was all preventable, stating, "This was something we saw that could possibly happen. She's had issues from a baby, issues my mom tried to address with the state of Georgia." For quite a while, the public wondered when Lamora's trial and sentencing would finally take place. Well, years later in 2024, it finally happened. When it came time for the trial, the prosecution argued that Lamora had put the kids into the overturned oven herself. They showed all the evidence collected by the police that pointed towards that having been the reality. Lamora pled not guilty to all of the charges against her, still saying that she was completely innocent. Either way, though, she was convicted on a good number of charges, most important being murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 35 years. And now's a wild one. Gamer killed father who wanted him to get a job. Here we have the case of another man in Florida, this time an angry gamer, 23-year-old Joseph Voigt. While he did enjoy partaking in a whole lot of video games, he also had quite a criminal history. Some of the charges he had been hit with in the past included battery and discharging a weapon in a residential area. On December 1st, 2024, he had just been released after being arrested on charges of battery once again. This takes us up to December 13th, less than 2 full weeks later. Joseph was chilling out at his parents' house, and for these 13 days, he really didn't do anything other than smoke and play video games. Eventually, his dad got pretty fed up with it, asking him to at least go out and try to find some sort of part-time job. Well, Joseph didn't really like this. He went and grabbed a gun, meeting his father, 63-year-old Marvin, in the driveway and shooting him multiple times. Feeling that this wasn't enough, he went back inside and made his way over to his mom, Susan, shooting her in the head as she sat up on the couch. By some miracle, Susan was still alive. The police were called, although it's unknown by who. They made their way out to the home and found Marvin dead in the driveway and Susan barely clinging to life on the couch. They brought her to the hospital where she was clearly in critical condition. Joseph, though, had long since fled. The police put out an emergency be-on-the-lookout order for him within Polk County and the surrounding area. It didn't take too long before some officers were able to find him driving around in his own car as if nothing had happened, being spotted at around 2 a.m. in Orlando. The police pulled him over as if it were a routine traffic stop before arresting him on suspicion of murder. When the investigators spoke to Joseph, he fully admitted that he had shot both of his parents pretty easily. He said that they had been, quote, riding his ass about making something out of his life. Joseph was subsequently charged with both murder and attempted murder. He showed up in court not too long after for an early hearing. He was then sent back to jail in Polk County to await his trial. He'll be held there without bond. His mom has since been released from the hospital, able to return to what's left of her life. And this one is, kids sneak into ICU to snap photos of 12-year-old girl they bullied into hanging herself. In a story of pure evil, we have a group of middle school bullies who endlessly picked on a girl at their school. That girl, 14-year-old Kalaya Turner, was both beaten and verbally bullied by a group of 5 other students for well over a year at Dr. Finizzi J. Fisher Middle School in Greenville, something that school staff never seemed to do anything about. The bullying started in 2021 when these other students would insult her by calling her Roach and saying that she looked like a man. Her teacher, Olivia Bennett, would hop onto the bandwagon, referring to her as Roach as well. When her parents went to school staff, one of the bullies beat her at school afterwards. In 2022, she finally stood up for herself and got into a fight with one of them, but this only escalated things. The school, instead of looking into the nuance of the situation, suspended Kalaya but none of the bullies. Nothing really stopped at that point, it only got worse. At times, they would even steal her clothes during gym and throw them out while she wasn't looking. With the school doing absolutely nothing, she eventually gave up. Eventually, the bullies pressured Kalaya into ending it all and hanging herself. In 2023, she attempted this, feeling that there was no other way out. She survived, to an extent, ending up in the ICU shortly after. Unfortunately, she had been dead for a full 8 minutes before the paramedics could revive her. She was then in a coma for weeks, having suffered from severe brain damage. While she was in the ICU, the bullies from her school snuck in under the guise of visiting her and took pictures of her in that condition. They then used the pictures to mock her on social media, continuing their antics even after she had lost all consciousness. They even came up with fake, insulting reasons as to how she had injured herself and ended up in that condition, taking the blame off of themselves while continuing to humiliate her. Now her parents are suing the school district, seeking damages. They're looking to cover the cost of the medical bills, psychiatric expenses, special education, life care expenses, disability care, injury to her psyche and emotional state and loss of enjoyment of life, and the parents lost wages while taking care of her. The Greenville County School District have denied all of the allegations against them, boldly claiming that they always take the appropriate steps to deal with bullying. They said, "We disagree with these allegations and have conducted a thorough investigation and review of each allegation at the time they were made. While we do not agree with the allegations, our hearts go out to Kalia Takora Turner, her mother, and their family." And here we go with delivery driver stabs pregnant customer 14 times over $2. Recently, people have been complaining about the lack of Florida man in these stories, and while this one isn't really a Florida man, it's definitely a Florida woman, and it really shows. Out at a Riviera motel in Kissimmee, Florida, a woman, her boyfriend, and her 5-year-old daughter were staying at a room while in the area for a birthday party. While they were winding down one fateful Sunday night, Melinda Irizarry, the mom, decided to place an order from a place called Marco's Pizza. 22-year-old Brianna Alvelo would be the one to deliver the pizza that evening. When she came out to the motel room, Melinda handed her a $50 bill and asked for change. When Brianna rudely said that she didn't have any change, Melinda instead returned to her wallet and then went out to her car to find some change and smaller bills. Brianna was very smug and impolite as this happened, scoffing and rolling her eyes as the family looked for the money. As she had also been late on the order anyway, Melinda only gave her a $2 tip and called it good. It was noted that Brianna simply rolled her eyes again upon receiving the tip and walked away without saying a word. However, she wouldn't stay gone for too long. Brianna drove off and met up with an unknown male who was carrying a gun. The two of them went back to the hotel room with masks on and demanded to be let in. When that obviously wasn't going to happen, they forced their way in instead by threatening the family with the gun. They told the family to go into the bathroom as they rummaged through all of their luggage to find either money or something to steal. Brianna dumped all of their stuff on the ground, kicked it around, and broke the daughter's Nintendo Switch out of pure spite. However, Brianna wasn't going to let the whole thing go just there. She rushed at Melinda with a knife as she shielded her daughter with her body. Brianna stabbed Melinda at least 14 times to her chest, legs, arms, and stomach. As the two criminals left, the family called the police and, in turn, an ambulance. The ambulance rushed Melinda to the hospital where she was found to have a ruptured lung. She underwent emergency surgery, but luckily she survived. Interestingly enough, this hospital visit was how Melinda found out that she was pregnant with their second child. As Brianna wasn't too great at keeping her identity a secret, the police were able to track her down fairly quickly. She was arrested and hit with charges of home invasion with a firearm, kidnapping, aggravated assault, and attempted murder. For this, she's looking at a possible life sentence. She's being held at the Osceola County Jail on a $55,000 bond, which she likely won't be able to pay with that $2. She doesn't even have a lawyer. The police are looking for the man who was with her that night, as he still has not been identified. And here we've got Australian exchange student poisoned by Taiwanese woman. Having been an international student myself in the past, I like to showcase cases involving them from time to time. For anyone who has studied abroad before or who is thinking about doing it, this case might hit home just a bit. A 25-year-old man from Queensland named Alex Shorey was studying abroad in Taiwan. There he was studying Chinese literature. It was here that he befriended a 46-year-old woman named Yang Ping, whose husband had suddenly died only a few months prior. Yang got very close with Alex in no time, quickly coming to get very attached to him. When Alex announced that he was pretty exhausted in Taiwan and running out of money, he decided that he would go back home. Yang did not take this well, and that's putting it lightly. She put a load of poison into Alex's food and drinks when she made her way out to his home one day. It's been said that she laced his food and drinks with rat poison several times between March and May of 2023. Alex began to suffer from diarrhea, blood in his urine, vomiting, nosebleeds, and a lot of pain. When Alex couldn't do much for himself, he called Yang herself to come over and help take care of him, likely exactly as she intended. Alex ended up in the hospital where Yang would continue to visit him. Here he hemorrhaged for a few days, eventually going into hypovolemic shock. He was facing a very real risk of organ failure. Later he went into cardiorespiratory collapse. While continuing to visit him, she continued to poison his food and water in his hospital room as well. Alex's mom eventually made her way out to Taiwan to visit her son. She was offered to stay at Yang's apartment, which she accepted. However, there she found some empty bottles of rat poison. Once this was discovered, Yang was monitored much more heavily at the hospital and wasn't allowed to give Alex anything. Eventually, Yang was arrested, where she denied even knowing who Alex was despite a mountain of evidence against that. The police slowly began to put the pieces together. The situation with Alex was actually very similar to what had happened with Yang's ex-husband. He was also a foreign man himself, being from England that Yang had developed a fascination with. Over months, she completely isolated him from his family back home until they completely stopped hearing from him. He had experienced symptoms very similar to what Alex experienced before suddenly passing away in January of 2023. The doctors even specifically stated that the man may have ingested rat poison. Yang had his body cremated very suddenly after his death, leading to any sort of subsequent investigation being very difficult. It seems that the police didn't even follow up on it afterwards. That is, until the man's brother came to Taiwan to look for him. Not having heard from him in a very long time, the brother didn't even realize that he was dead. This caused the police to connect the two cases together. Still though, no charges had been filed in relation to the British man's death. Prosecutors in Taiwan have pushed for a murder charge against Yang Ping. They said, although Alex fortunately did not die, the suffering he endured in Taiwan was immense. He was at constant risk of massive bleeding from various parts of his body and could have died at any moment. The defendant's actions, methods, and post-crime attitude were extremely malicious, and there were no mitigating factors to show compassion. Alex's family raised over $200,000 on GoFundMe to pay for his medical evacuation back home to Australia, a risky process. Shortly after his move, he suffered from another reaction. Still though, he survived and now lives a normal life. Yang is facing a very hefty prison sentence if she gets convicted. And now we have, car chase leads to fiery explosion and funny mugshots. This case is just strange, and it's more strange that it's mostly only known to the public because the two suspects look like a couple of beaten-up, disheartened Disney villains in their mugshots. Two 19-year-olds, Michael Howell McGlynn and Christine Elizabeth Romero, were caught driving around a Subaru Forester that had previously been reported stolen during an armed carjacking. When the Larimer County Sheriff's Office spotted the car in a parking lot in Berthoud, just chilling out, they decided to stop them at an intersection when they pulled out. However, when the cops tried to stop the two carjackers, they sped off rather than slow down. This led to a car chase where the police followed as the young couple hit speeds of well over 100 miles an hour. When they slowed down just a bit to turn at another intersection, the police rammed the car in order to stop them. This led to the car hitting a curb, slamming into a nearby tree, and exploding. I'm sure the owner of the stolen car was just fine with this outcome. The police were able to pull the young couple from the now burning car, relatively uninjured all things considered. They also found their loaded rifle along the way. Both of them were taken to the hospital to be treated, but it wasn't long before they were released and put into police custody. There, they were thrown into the Larimer County Jail. Both of them look pretty defeated, beaten up, and ragged in their mugshots. With Michael having a big bandage around his entire head and Christine looking up at the ceiling less than enthusiastic with a fat lip, the two became a laughingstock online. Comments were quick to ask if Christine was caught with roughly 100 Dalmatians during the arrest. Others told the two that Halloween had already ended a couple of weeks prior. Michael was hit with a charge of reckless driving, obstructing a police officer, and vehicular eluding, resulting in bodily injury to another. Christine was hit with a charge of conspiracy to commit a Class 4 felony and for an outstanding warrant for assault on a police officer. And now we've got 17-year-old girl said her classmate is a cheater, so she poisoned her goat. Here we have the story of a 17-year-old cheerleader, the president of the Future Farmers of America at her school in Cedar Park, Texas. Her name is Aubrey Valdingham, and she seems to take a keen interest in goat shows. She prided herself on her very own show goat named Lacey, having entered her in multiple contests at her school. The thing is, she would usually lose to another student with an even cooler goat than hers. This would send her into a rage. She would accuse the fellow student of cheating, although she couldn't really explain how she was cheating to make her goat more appealing to the judges. In her jealousy, she decided that she would eliminate the competition, literally, and just go ahead and murder the student's goat. She used what is called a drench gun to do so, giving the goat poison inside the school's own barn. She even took a video of the goat while doing so and sent it to its owner, and only one day later the goat would come to pass away. Vets were able to find that the goat had died from pesticide ingestion. Given that Aubrey was the most likely suspect, the police took her in and asked her some questions. She fully confessed to killing the goat, saying that she did so because her classmate was a cheater. The accused cheater's mom said, "She's saying it's because of cheating, but from what we've deciphered, she was just really jealous. You can't even cheat when it comes to showing goats. It makes no sense, so that's where the jealousy really kind of falls into place. She admitted to poisoning him multiple times over several days, so it's a pretty rough situation. We don't believe there's any remorse there. We hope that she has to serve jail time and that she gets some kind of mental help. It's all bizarre. We want justice served, we don't want a slap on the wrist. We want to make sure that she is punished. At this point, we don't feel like she thinks she's going to be punished than she needs to be. She needs to take ownership for what she's done." The police took Aubrey's phone and found a number of incriminating Google searches. Queries like, "How much bleach can kill an animal?" and "Poisoning pets, what you should know." In the end, she searched for how to clear search history, but it's fairly clear that she didn't follow the tutorial correctly. Aubrey was booked into jail but released on a $5,000 bail fairly quickly. She's been banned from attending her high school, only allowed to go back on the condition that she's found innocent. She's been charged with cruelty to livestock animals, which is a felony. She's set to be back in court in 2025. And this one is a monetization nightmare. Man jailed for hiring sex worker for 13-year-old son. Here we have a very strange case that took place in Bromley, England. This all started when a mom reluctantly agreed to let her son go spend the night with his mostly estranged scumbag of a father. This father, who has remained nameless in the media in order to protect his son's identity, wasn't really happy with where his son's life was going. He was disappointed that he was a virgin at the age of 13 and wasn't happy at all with his lack of partying. He decided to arrange for 2 prostitutes to come out to a hotel room, one for him and one for his son. He told the sex workers that his son had just turned 18. When his son didn't want to sleep with the 26-year-old woman, his father told him, "Don't be a pussy," saying that they were on their way and it was too late to cancel now. He even tried to offer his son a fat line of cocaine, but the boy told him, "I'm fucking 13, that's ridiculous." Eventually, after pressuring from his dad, the boy went into the other room with the woman. At some time during the night, the mom texted the dad and asked what they were doing, only to be told, "Piss off, I'll guard him with my life. Let the boy stretch his wings." Eventually, word got back to the boy's mom, and this led to word getting to the police as well. The dad was arrested and eventually ended up on trial. There, he told the court, "I'm a good father. I might not look it in your eyes. It was only because he was feeling down because he'd broken up with his girlfriend and he said he'd done all that stuff before. So the brass sucked his prick. Job done. Whatever." He continued by saying, "I've genuinely got a good heart. On paper, I must sound like an absolute reprobate, but that's not the case at all." The prosecutors applied for a sexual harm prevention order, which banned him from any unsupervised contact with minors. The dad got angry, saying, "I'm not a prolific sex offender. I find that harsh. I'm not a danger to children. It was just my boy." In addition, the father was sentenced to 4 years in prison for arranging the act with his son. The judge praised the boy, though, unhappy with both of his parents, saying, "He should feel no guilt whatsoever. He was the more sensible person in all of this." And now, car thief writes totally stole a car today in diary. You would think that, since most people know not to brag about your crimes to other criminals because they're going to spill the beans eventually, you probably shouldn't also write down your crimes, even if you thought that nobody would come to see it. Well, some people make it really easy on the detectives by doing that very thing. Back in August, a van was stolen in Mankato, Minnesota. Vanessa Guerrera, a DoorDash driver, had taken an interest in the car, deciding to swipe it and sell it for scrap. She took it out to a local salvage business and sold it for $2,000. Afterward, though, the employees began to suspect that it was stolen and called the police. They told them who had sold them the car, so the police were able to make their way straight out to their suspect. When the police came into contact with Vanessa, she denied knowing that the vehicle was stolen. She also couldn't explain to them how she had gotten her hands on it. When searching the scene, they found Vanessa's journal nearby and decided to give it a look. On the page listed with the date that the car was stolen, they came upon an interesting entry, one that read, "Totally stole a car today. Something I never thought of doing. Fucking super freaking out about it." After Vanessa effectively snitched on herself via the diary entry, she was arrested and charged with both receiving stolen property and theft. It seems that she previously had issues relating to cars in the past, having gotten in trouble for both driving without a license and without insurance at multiple points in time before. Once again, thank you for watching my video. If you found it interesting, please give it a like, it really helps me out in the algorithm, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I've still got a podcast going with a few of my friends called the NBR Podcast. If you find this channel interesting, you might like that one too. I've also opened up a merch store. There you can get yourself some cool Dire Trip t-shirts and a lot of other stuff. If you want, go ahead and follow me on social media. If anything were to ever happen to this channel again, that would probably be the only way you'd ever hear about it. I also really appreciate when people subscribe to me on Patreon. There you can get videos early, ad-free, and uncensored. Channel memberships are back up too, and you get the same benefits there as well. Once again, this has been your host Kyle. Thank you, and good night.